Whoa. Matrix. Resurrections. Random rockers. So I'm in the positive camp. I'm just going to say it right now. And I really don't understand the ones that aren't. Not fully, at least. I understand there's flaws there, but they seem to want to focus more on the flaws and not the good things. You know? Good things like the relationships between Keanu Reeves as Neo and Carrie Ann Moss. They never left to me. The Morpheus thing is its own kind of thing, as it turns out. With Bahir, I might be getting the name wrong, so I'm sorry if I butchered my friends. But yeah, this is a good beard stroker. Yes. I've been a massive Matrix fan, and I was hoping to do some things talking about the previous 3 films. That's unfortunate didn't get to happen. I got lazy. I might do that in the future. I did get to see the first film and do it for something for a Patreon, and I regret how I handled that in there. Luckily, no one can publicly see that. Thank God. But anyways, and to those involved in that, I apologize. Y'all don't think I'm being full of shit about how I feel about the Matrix, and that I focus too much on the other thing. It just happens. But yeah, I had a fun time in this, and seeing in IMAX I definitely do recommend. However, I understand if you're in a certain particular situation. A friend of mine, I'm going to tell you, if you see this before I tell you myself, I understand if you can just stick with the HBO Max while you have the chance to watch it that way, which is not going to be for very long. So, I get it. So what? Just do that hurriedly, so we can talk about it. And hopefully you like it. But as far as I'm concerned, I like it. I can't say masterclass though. That's the first. That's only the first, because it's as far as I'm concerned, it's my second favorite Matrix film, with Reloaded being number 3 and Revolutions being number 4. Not perfect films, though I am somewhat of a defender of those movies. I will say they're not bad, but they're far from great. And this isn't exactly that either. I feel like this one makes up for those movies and gives those movies merit. But also, you could tell that there are moments about it that some people will feel that the meta moments will come across to them as too meta and too much to the point where it seems like they're trying to be forced to be meta, but I don't feel that it was, for me, at least. I feel like this is all more this is a case of being polarized more for the fact of opinions being subjective as opposed to being objective. And I feel like the people that are hating on this are the ones that are wanting to tell us that it's objective. No. This film's amazing. Not only did I like them, Jessica Chanwick, I think is her name. I probably butchered it. But her Bugsy. And yes, they did a thing in the movie where they literally did reference a line saying, "What's up, Doc?" But it worked. I had a good laugh. So, and yeah, I get that the beginning of it seems like it could be seemed humorous, but it winds up in context being more horrifying in a psychological horror type sense. Like in this, I would say it's more, or at least it gets to the point where the psychological horror aspect seeps in enough that it becomes that, I don't know if it keeps you from laughing or if it becomes more of a dark comedy in that sense, or a psychological horror comedy, I guess, in that sense, in a similar way to like a Or at least if you still find it kind of humorous, how they handle the meta situations, I would put it on par in the Cabin in the Woods type of way of handling that. Even though I haven't seen it, or at least like an Evil Dead-ish thing. I don't know how else to put it. Like, it's only Lana Wachowski that does this one. I'm trying to remember what her actual name was back when it was Wachowski Brothers. Which, honestly, I haven't been that enthused with a lot of Wachowski stuff post-Speed Racer, for being honest with ourselves here. I think once the Matrix thing was done, and then after Speed Racer, they just couldn't do it. Nothing else they did ever really clicked with anybody at all. They kind of ran their course, and Matrix was kind of still the magnum opus of films that they've essentially made. The involvements with V for Vendetta, mostly as producers, was nice. I still quote that one as well. But this was a nice return to form, I'd say, for at least a Wachowski, if not all of the Wachowskis. And I'm going to say, the way that things go, there's a lot of familiar beats to that of the first movie. Especially more so within the beginning and some aspects about the end. Or at least a sense of through line is similar, but there's a way that they do things differently. The meta stuff, as well as, and how they handle the situations and how they go through it is different in an interesting kind of way. There's more to Neil Patrick Harris's character, the therapist guy. Thank God, because it's Neil Patrick fucking Harris. If you're going to have him in this movie, you better give him something to work with. So, luckily. And that's where it starts off with that, and then we eventually get to the beats of what we know as him. For those who've seen the first Matrix, him taking red pill, and then we do get to see more. And don't worry, they didn't ignore things, because you do need to see these 3 films anyway, all 3 of them, actually, and it will be warranted, and I think you won't hate the 3rd film's ending as much because of this movie's existence. So I don't understand the people who say that it doesn't, because if that is the case, then 2 and 3 were definitely off for naught, and I feel like those people are the ones that are championing the fact that none of these other movies post them should consider existing. And I feel like those people need to just lay the fuck off. And I think it's just more critics than, I would say, fans themselves. Because, in fact, there was the Rotten Tomatoes had at one point, the equivalent amount was 69. Ironically, this film, unfortunately, only went up to 69 million, and it had a really bad budget box office, which means we may not be getting a sequel of another trilogy of movies, which I'm glad, honestly, given the way this movie ended, I'm actually happy that it seems like it's open for it, but I feel like I don't think it needs to be open for another trilogy, and I don't think Lana Wachowski would want that, or the Wachowskis in general at this point. I would rather say, overall, that this movie, the way that it goes about itself, I would rather see a series instead, and as a follow-up instead. There's enough. I think there can kind of. I think you've done enough to at least do what needs to be done, because you've already made now Trinity and Neo 2 OP for it to matter. Yeah, 2 OP at this point now for it to matter. And now you've opened up the doors to the Wachowskis. I feel you open up a series for the other characters, especially if you want to focus on the journey of Bugsy and their crew, because the rest of the crew's fine. They did great, and even with the way they handled Morpheus in this movie. Which, the way this starts, and now at this point, it's spoilers territory. And I'm going to make it at 9:30. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. And yes, it seems he is basically somehow been stuck in this whole... Apparently, from what has happened in this movie, we find out that they were basically legitimately resurrected. Resurrected, essentially. That's how he's able to see. When he leaves out, he's able to see and everything. His body's been reconstructed and everything. Because it seems that, and from what I've gathered, the machine that helped Neo defeat Smith is the villain of this story. And that character is the analyst, who wound up basically being one of the machine characters that wound up taking over the Matrix and rebooting it completely. That's the only reboot thing that happens in this entire thing. Funnily enough. That makes sense, at least. And it all makes sense. Everything makes sense of how it happened, and it turns out, and somehow that's how Trinity and Neo are still alive in all this. And they basically find out that, in a very almost Monsters, Inc. kind of way, and how they used to use scares as energy source, and instead, I mean, they realized that using their human flesh wasn't enough anymore, and they were losing resources, and then they found out that through more mental manipulation of sorts, in the power of human emotion, in terms of the human emotion itself, and passion, and all these things, were what he used to manipulate everything. To essentially form this new Matrix to where essentially Neo and Trinity are essentially powering it and are strong enough together enough to where it powers the entire Matrix still. They're what's keeping the Matrix alive, basically, or at least they are well enough endowed to keep it alive. So they both are in turn have become they don't show the gold code in this movie like they were mentioned in the previous two, but I think at this point they didn't need to because it's a new Matrix, and I think they got rid of the gold code, or at least they made it to where, because they got rid of a lot of things, and that included essentially most of the exiles, or at least they were running the exiles out. Hence why Merovingian and all the other exiles are essentially poor, and the current Merovingian looks like fucking what's-his-face after Robin Williams' character after coming out of the fucking game in the original Jumanji in 95. It's and he's just there for fodder and exposition, which was just some bullshit. Even, I'm kind of with Neo at looking at him and you've got to be fucking kidding me. That's the one thing in this movie that is probably the thing that, no matter if you'll love it or hate it, how polarizing this movie is, it is universally probably the only thing that is kind of hated about this movie. Or at least how they handled him. Not so much, but I do think, given how things ended with his character, for the most part, from what I remember of at least Reloaded, there he was very briefly in Revolutions. But not that touched up upon. He's sort of involved in it, and it was more just for a dealing thing. But for the most part, it seemed from what I gathered from him once he lost Persephone, I think was the name of the one character who's slightly kind of sort of might have played a part in my puberty a little bit. Not as much as some other things, but it was a small part. So I guess her character was a succubus or something, or some form of vampiric thing, in terms of her programming as her exile programming. But regardless of that has nothing to do with this movie. But yeah, the Merovingian now just owns nothing and is not in the higher class tier. Instead, they made them in the forced them out into the lower class tier. And then and it seems some were even forced into, and we see what happens with Smith, who is this newer, younger body. And it turns out his programming is sort of kind of relegated back to agent, but not quite. He still has the power level. He's not as ridiculously viral or anything. He's more contained in that way, but he's still but he's done in a way where I guess he's more module, or something of that nature, to where he's sort of not as strong of a virus, and he's just works more as more of an exile program that works similarly to an agent, I guess. Or at least that's what it becomes clear as. I understand a lot of people wish Miss Hugh. I kind of do too, but given some of the scenes and the way they were played out, I don't know if I would have liked it as much if Hugo Weaving did them himself. And I'm fine with how they did it, and yet he was called Tom the whole time, but that's because this is a completely different program, and this program was a lot more personal through this interaction since he had been pre-plugged in. Yeah, that's what happened with that. And that's why I think I understood why they called him Tom, and we only had the one time where it was Mr. Anderson thing, and it's just because neither of them are as strong, but it seems he was able to free himself a little bit better somehow through, I guess, just the form of the plot, which worked fine. It was needed at that point. It worked. It was needed, and at this point, I guess, because Neo and Trinity are free now, officially, it in turn led to him finally being free of his strength, some sense of freedom from his strengths. But I guess because he's an older virus and this is a newer Matrix programming, he's not as strong, I guess. He's still strong, but he's not as crazy, ridiculous, whatever the fuck shit he was doing in the past two movies. And apparently it turns out that he was making a failsafe for himself, and the Morpheus we are dealing with is actually a programming of the memories, of a module programming from his memories that eventually somehow, it seems the analyst, played by Neil Patrick Harris, who was the therapist, turns out he was just using therapy style, all this stuff to manipulate him to thinking he was just a little nutso crazy from the way the game, how to where all his... and he was too powerful, so he had to mentally manipulate him to think he was still meant to be in this world, stuck in it. As a game programmer and that all the stuff that happened in the third films were all turned into video games, and then they tried to make a fourth film, and it was such a pun to what was going on. And some of the other characters and actors were interesting. I remember the actor that's helping him out. I remember him in this one, like, college movie or something that involved Drake Bell or something, who's canceled now, apparently. Whatever. That's how I recognize that guy. You know what I'm talking about for some of my friends, if you see this and see the movie. The action scenes weren't as I will admit, seem not as strong, but they do what they need to do to service the plot, which is really what I was more interested in when it came to this movie because of the way the trailers set themselves up. And everything comes finally pieced together, even having to go back and see the trailer while I was waiting for Spider-Man No Way Home. Everything just kind of, I'm already piecing shit together. It was crazy. But, yeah, overall, they did this to where the main mission, it gets to the point where now you find out all the story you need to know to piece things together yourself from having seen all the other three movies. And then eventually it gets to the point where it just goes into the main mission, and that is basically to save Trinity at this point, and defeat the analyst. And it does happen to where now they've saved Trinity, or at least make her have the decision, and then it was more about them finding a way to get out of the Matrix by that point. And at that point, they won, and now they're free, and they have and now she has more now all of a sudden, the thing is, she wasn't able to fly immediately, which I was fine with, by the way. I didn't care that he didn't, but I was cool with it, and to see that she flew instead first thing, it just was kind of even more interesting, and it just went to show how much more one they were with love. And even there was a credit scene I think Lana Wachowski had to put in that involved just her parents, her mom and dad, I guess, and how love is strong bonded. And I love how the message in and of itself at the end of this, when it comes to that relationship between Trinity and Neo, is how love conquers all. And it was even more fucked up in Trinity's case because she literally wound up, what was not expected, I thought she had a family. She wound up with a family and stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen with the kids. That's my only, I don't know. Or are they just as much programmed in that same sense like the guy is? Or did those two kids come with the territory of the guy and they were just programmed? And this guy is more egotistical and manipulative. He's not like, and basically this analyst took the place of the architect, who was more robotic and didn't give a shit. So, which was fine. But in turn, the analyst also got rid of other programs, and that includes the Oracle, which is why we never hear anything of her. But I love that there was the little girl from the past 2 movies, that I think might have been the Keymaster's daughter or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, I love this movie. I like this movie a lot. I don't know if I could call it a masterpiece. Like I said, at worst, thumbs up. At best, a Brox. And I never thought I'd say that about a Matrix movie again. I never thought I would. I loved just the way, and I love the way they ended this thing where, like, Trinity's kicking his ass and shit. And it's like, just, like, I love it. And Neil's just sitting there like, take it, bitch. It's basically Neil Patrick Harris doing some of his things when he has it was somewhat humorous, but it was worth it. It made sense, and it was like, yeah, it's like, fuck, I ain't doing shit. One thing I'm going to do is make sure I'll flip your job back so you kick your ass more. It was fucking glorious. And them doing like they did with the ending, and they tried to do, which the version in this movie, by a tribute group, a brass horn tribute group literally called Brass Against, which was essentially the Rage Against the Machine brass cover. It's fine. It's okay. But it's not the Rage version, man. Could have just kept the original. Don't get me wrong, I understand you didn't want to do that, but I feel like that was the one thing that they could have kept in this version that would have really brought it in to me. And you do have a thin credit scene, but it's really them doing a stupid cat. Like, the whole, making fun, they further made humor, and just to show how dated it is, make fun of cat videos. About how the internet, with how the bloom of the memes in the internet, cat videos. Yeah, just, it kind of dates itself in that regard. That part dates itself a bit. You don't need to stay for that. Unless for some stupid reason they try to do some cat... Like, I could see some cat memes happening now involving the Matrix because of this. But, that's the only good thing that comes from that scene. That's fine. That's fine. We're going to need some light for the rest of these videos. But anyways, I love what they do with this... Then there's Bugs was great. I love the other characters in it. I loved how they deal with Morpheus as a module, and then he's more of a program. And then we find out that it seems all for naught because the Matrix is still going, but the machines started fighting themselves eventually, and some of them defected and became helpful to humans. In fact, it turned out, and we find out the new general and the one leading humanity now, and I'm forgetting the name of the place. I want to say it's Eons is the name of the place now. But it's not Zion anymore. They've defected from it, and they decided they couldn't bother to hide from them as much, so they just created they basically advanced a little bit more in the technology that they had through this new city, as opposed to Zion. Where Zion was still stuck in the old ways where it's just all humanity all the time, and they couldn't realize they needed to work with the machines to help come up with something. And the most they've done, though I understand some people saying it's cringe, but given the Matrix itself and what they used to have to deal with, the goop they used to fucking eat, hell, I'm happy they can even make strawberries. Hell, at this point, Cypher, which almost might have, if Cypher saw this shit, he'd have at least been like, well, fuck. I would have thought about his betrayal a little bit more, and he might have really enjoyed that fucking steak a lot more once they come up with that steak. I'm telling you. Like, shit. I could just like, it just reminds me of also some Mega XLR show where it's like with how they do the food, come up with the food just like that and stuff. Even though like the one guy's like more just thinking about girls, not thinking that this thing is only about food, and of all the food that thing does was hot dog. But it has nothing to do with this movie, but I thought it was funny and it kind of reminded me of it. But anyways, it was, oh my God. I had so much fun. Even with the way they ended this, now they're in control of the Matrix and they're going to do whatever the fuck they want. And this is enough, like, it opens up a new trilogy, but I don't think it should. Like I said, they should instead, like, and I love that Niobe's back, and it turns out we found out what happened to the real Morpheus, and because of that, and that's why that's why she's too stubborn. She's willing to move forward with the machines, but she's too stubborn to do more than that. And I love how they eventually fix that, and it takes the whole thing with bugs in them to find out the truth about it. What happened with that, and how they saw how the machines were fighting each other. And there's still that issue, clearly. And they know that they were having problems with the sources, so they were just fighting the other machines for control, basically. And they were having their own little civil war. So instead of the humanity having to deal with a war with the machines, instead they're more, I guess, the ones that are against the machines that wanted to enslave humanity, I guess. Or at least there's some that defected that helped humanity. And I loved how that came about with it. And some of them, in fact, some of which helped Neo escape, as well as in fact, one of them was the little girl. And it turns out played by this one chick that's, I think she's more known for being in I'm trying to remember oh no, I'm getting that confused with some other chick, but she was still pretty hot there. Anyways. Yeah. Chanwick was great. She's a standout. I hope they'll do a series to where they focus on this new crew. I don't know if we'll deal with Neo or not, or if they can focus on this new crew or any newer other crew members. Like maybe a different crew that winds up finding a new potential, getting the red pill, and going from there. You know, it could free some people, give them more options and shit, or at least through what they did, showing other people what they see and what they can do. So, and now the analysts they can't do shit, and he's probably relegated to whatever the fuck the architect used to be. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a new Oracle somehow, or if they're going to try to at this point they're trying to rebuild the Matrix more in their own image, and now humanity at this point, or at least Neo and Trinity are the ones more in control of the Matrix now, because they are the core source now of this Matrix. So I don't know what to do. I would rather see a series and them focusing on how the other people are handling things, and then hear about how Neo and Trinity being more like supporting characters that do add something to the table as nice little reference points, and seeing how they handle themselves. I don't know with how they're going to handle running shit. So who knows? If we don't get anything past this movie, I'm okay with it as well. I'm not too worried about it. So the fact that this isn't doing as well, maybe it's for the best, so long as the studio don't fucking do something stupid to basically erase everything we loved about these movies. Especially those that love these movies. It has become polarizing, but I wouldn't say it's nearly as polarizing as what happened with Last Jedi. Not nearly as bad in that regard. But I love this. I took my red pill, and I love this movie. What are you going to? If you like this video, rock that like button with Russ if you must. Hit the subscribe button link. With the subscribe button, click the notification bells. Likes and description for other things, including my Facebook page. Like, follow me there. Amongst a bunch of other things, including maybe some GoFundMe's of other sorts. Probably including, I think, maybe my cousin. I think I still have that in there somewhere. Who knows? But anyways, as always, guys, this is Rockin' Movies with Tyler. I've been Tyler. Keep it random. Keep it random. Keep it real. Keep it rocking. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, y'all.